Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Be That Lawyer with Fretzin podcast. I'm happy that you're with us. This is an absolutely phenomenal opportunity for you as a lawyer to be your best self, to learn new things, to identify problems and challenges and work to resolve them through this podcast. We've got over 400 episodes that we've done. That's a lot of episodes, Erin. Agreed?
A lot.
Putting you on the spot right away. Don't even waste any time. And so, look, you can go back and just listen to them all if you have that kind of time, or if you want to be a little more particular, you can go in and look for subjects. You can go to the fretzin.com website and just search through my podcast library. Might be easier than on your phone, but look, if hiring is your issue, Erin and I are going to talk about that in some great detail today, but there's a number of other recruiters and other people I've had on the show from the past. There's marketing, there's business development, time management, health and wellness, you name it, we've got it. And that's what we'll say about that. Erin, you were so kind to send me a quote of the show, and I want to start the show with that if it's okay. And I want to get your take on it. So it's embrace what you don't know, especially in the beginning, because what you don't know can become your greatest asset. It ensures that you will absolutely be doing things different from everybody else. And that's Sarah Blakely. So welcome to the show. And yeah, please, give us some insight on that quote and why you love it so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So I lived in Atlanta for 4 years and actually lived in the building where Sarah Blakely has her company, Spanx. So always an inspiration as I was beginning my company. But most of all is I didn't start off my company as hiring. I knew what my passions were going into it. I think a lot of people start their business based on different things that they've encountered in life, and therefore that's their passion. But what I've noticed is I used to get asked a lot of the times if I did certain things that were relative to what I did. And it's not that I necessarily said, hey, no, I'm not necessarily doing that. I would explore it and see if it was a possibility. And that's what I did with hiring, especially after getting certified in workplace culture. I found that there was a low retention rate in a lot of these law firms and wanted to look further into it. So it was less about I'm not doing it yet, but let me figure out how I can do it to make a difference.
Yeah. And here's some Fretzin trivia people don't know. I actually ran a recruiting firm for 5 years, a sales recruiting firm back in the day before I worked with lawyers. Very, very challenging, very difficult to run a recruiting firm. So I admire that you got into it. And I think your background is, as you mentioned, is it more in branding than in recruiting, and you sort of found a way to morph them together?
Yeah, my background is in business, but the other half of my business is career transition. And so I've seen the individual side. I've heard the complaints. I know what's going on in the market. Something as little as recruiters are constantly ghosting us. And so it's the balance of how are we not just ignoring those candidates, how are we making sure that the reputation of the firm is still there and we're maintaining that communication, especially if they're a good candidate that maybe a small firm will grow and they want to hire them down the road. So I definitely have seen it from both sides, which is how I got into hiring originally.
Got it. And so, and for everybody listening, Erin Andersen is the founder of Your Brand Networker, giving us a little bit of background and jumping right in, if you don't mind. I mean, why? Sure. I mean, there's challenges in hiring in every sector, but for some reason, and I could be wrong, that lawyers particularly have a hard time finding good talent and keeping good talent. Can you sort of talk to that for a moment?
That's definitely the case. I think number one is a lot of firms aren't actually looking at their culture. They dive right in, often coming from big law and finding another partner that wants to do the same. And just like anybody else starting a business, there's a lot of components and they know they have to get the business in. So they'll just hire people to fill a seat. Something that I hear sometimes is, how cheap can I get them for? That's somebody who's probably going to leave soon and they aren't good talent, right? So are we?
That's a trigger right there.
Yeah. Are we looking to build, talent that's going to stay or someone to just fill a seat? So I do find that's an initial issue. Later on, I find that sometimes they've just hired recruiters that don't look at the culture and don't look at personality. They just check the technical skill box. That's an issue a lot of the time. And that usually leads to like your every 2-year legal admin or associate jumping from firm to firm. Lastly, I would say, how are we standing out in today's market? We're in a market where we have competition with firms hiring on a hybrid basis. Is there something that can set us apart from another firm so that these people aren't leaving? What is the advantage of somebody staying long-term? Is there a possible partnership track eventually? Are we advertising that in a job post and having those continuous conversations?
Yeah. And I think when you look at the skills gap for lawyers around recruiting, hiring, training, onboarding training, and retention. Those are all
Hmm.
learned skills. I mean, some people have more natural ability to do that than others, but I think
Right.
these are all skills that business people have to go through to
Yeah.
run a successful business. And lawyers, I think, just kind of skip it. And
Yep.
there's, here's your phone, here's your desk, you've got the skills, do the job, I'll start throwing hours at you. And then that person doesn't work out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Here's a work laptop, for example, and thinking that that's what's going to set them apart. Often when I receive an initial job posting from a firm, there really isn't anything about culture, which means that that firm has gone on to post job postings and recruit without talking about what they offer to the candidate. And so we don't even know if they were initially attracting those right candidates. And that's something that I focus on. I feel like I have a pretty good feeling at this point. I'm sure you did when you recruited as well right away when I'm interviewing if it's a personality fit. But if a firm is open to possibly training on certain areas, it's going to be advantageous for them long term to make sure that personality fit is there and they're going to feel comfortable. If they were to go out to dinner, for example, right? Is that somebody that you want to have at your firm?
Yeah. So there are a lot of executive coaches, leadership coaches out
Mhm.
there now, and I've interviewed a ton on my show. They're really the ones that are helping lawyers to figure out, how to, grow and hire through, personality, culture, and all the different elements. Like, what are they really looking for? If the job could talk and if the person could match it. Um,
Sure.
but that's not easy to do. So for someone that maybe doesn't have all those skills, what's the best way for them to think about hiring that first admin or that first associate?
Yeah, definitely. The first thing that I would make sure is that you have a clear understanding of what the responsibilities are going to be. A lot of times a firm says, I need an admin. Well, what does that mean? Is it really an admin or is it a client relations assistant? Those are two very different roles. And so often most firms come to me and they say they want to hire for X. And I'm like, that's not really the right title. And then what happens is they're attracting the wrong candidates. And then they fall in love with those candidates because they think that they have, such a great personality, but the skill set isn't there. That also leads to a retention problem. Did we actually hire for the right role? If you want a litigation associate, just hiring an associate without litigation and hoping that they're going to be strong at litigation might not be the best approach. I would say I see it most often in support roles. And so I would really look at market comps. In the market, what are we look at the responsibility section. What are we calling these roles? Is there consistency in your area to be able to determine if that's the right title for the position?
And say that again. Where are the comps? Where can lawyers find what lawyers are making or what admins are making in their market?
Yeah. So even if you do a quick Google search in your area and look at all the different recruiting platforms for the positions that are currently posted, I look for consistency and responsibilities with title. And once I start to see that, I will say it does vary by location. I do see consistencies in like the Northeast versus the West on what they're calling different positions. But it could be as little as a legal assistant versus a legal administrative assistant versus an office manager. Those are all very different. And if somebody isn't in the world of hiring every day, it's very likely they're going to hire an office manager when maybe they actually need an executive assistant for themselves.
Gotcha. And what are you seeing in the market right now? I mean, I'm noticing that attorneys are overwhelmed with work. They're looking
Mhm.
for associates. They're really struggling to find, especially the ones that are in specific niches, are really
Yep.
struggling to find good associates these days. What's going on?
Yeah. I think the first part is what firms are offering. And so, for example, culture, but also is a firm possibly offering hybrid and one isn't. I'm thinking of a firm in not New York City that I hired for, and they were very adamant about not going ahead and offering a hybrid schedule or not offering a ton of flexibility. And so, when interviewing candidates, a question that comes out a lot is, well, is it possible to just have flexibility on Fridays? Is that possible? I have a family. And a lot of the times the answer is no. And that's a much harder hire when maybe, even if we look at hybrid now, hybrid could mean once a quarter. It could mean once every 2 weeks, once a month. So what's happening is when jobs are being posted, candidates are also filtering by hybrid, remote, or in person. If
Mm,
we could only have that hybrid flexibility, I truly believe that would make a difference. The second thing I would say is salary transparency. A lot of people are no longer applying to positions if the salary isn't listed. And there's a very interesting argument on a law firm side versus a candidate side. And it goes back and forth. And I see opinions on both sides of, what different law firms think. My opinion is, salary is transparent in New York State. And I do believe eventually that is going to be the case all over the country, but it saves a lot of time during the hiring process. And so a lot of these firms will come to me and they said, we've posted for associate positions, but everyone we hire is coming from big law and they want 185,000 for 2 years of experience. Well, right, because they're coming from big law and they don't know what the expectation is for small law. And so I always suggest be transparent with salary, even if it's a large range, so that going into the interview, this is aligned and they're not wasting your time.
Got it. So yeah, that really is helpful. You mentioned to me in our pre-interview, and I've been teaching LinkedIn for like 16, 17 years. So you and I are like on the same wavelength. Yeah. About the importance of LinkedIn and how valuable it can be from a recruiting and hiring perspective. Why is LinkedIn such an amazing tool?
Yeah, so I can tell you, I recently managed, I guess you could say, an Indeed profile for another candidate because they felt that they wanted to post on Indeed as well. And so it actually gave me the opportunity to see the balance of candidates between the two platforms, and it only further confirmed that LinkedIn is the best platform, in my opinion, for hiring, because we're actually able to see the profiles of these candidates and verify the logo of where they've worked in the past. A lot of the times I find a lot of additional information I don't even find on an interview. I scan their activity section. And so a lot of the times I can see what types of conversations are they participating in? What are they posting in? Something I found recently on a candidate, and I found this before, is they won't include their most recent position on a resume. Say, for example, they started a job 2 months ago. They're really not enjoying it. They submit their resume without that position currently on it. But on LinkedIn, in their activity section, there's a post from 2 months ago celebrating their new position. And so I've often found that on LinkedIn, where you could not find that on another platform, there's also the featured section on LinkedIn. A lot of the times I find links to their businesses that they don't list on their resume. So maybe a conflict of interest or just too much time spent outside. And I've unfortunately found some fairly graphic things on LinkedIn, on candidates' pages that I may find on social media, or even worse. And then I could not find that out by a resume or interviewing them. So I definitely scan all the profiles. Is there anything that's a red flag? There's no other platform providing that exact professional presence as LinkedIn does.
And so that's the providing a lot of the background and research that you do when you're looking at candidates for a firm. And then Is there some proactivity that you then use to using that as a tool to then reach out to them to talk to them about the opportunity?
Yeah, definitely. I think, LinkedIn Recruiter, right? Like that's a great example how we're able to reach out to those candidates. I will say that, their emails are listed on their resume, and sometimes that's a better form of communication, but it's definitely I almost call it like a backup. If they don't answer through email, we also have the ability to access their profile and contact them there.
Yeah. So, you mentioned culture now a few times, and
Mm-hmm.
and I feel that a lot of lawyers want to make big bucks, but at the same time they want to be happy, and I don't know that those two always align. Can you talk to the different cultures and versus maybe them going after the big money, but then realizing maybe too late that, hey, I'm making a lot of money, but God, am I unhappy?
Sure. So from the candidate perspective, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of the times I find, because I only hire for small to medium-sized firms, there are big law candidates in the pile. And the consistencies that I find is that they are looking for more of a work-life balance. I've interviewed candidates that it has been years since they've taken a vacation. If they've even taken a weekend, it's looked down upon and not suggested to do it moving forward. I've seen candidates that have missed out on major life milestones, and now they're, say for example, in their late 30s, and they feel like they've missed out on personal things in life and they're looking to switch. I've also found that they're not getting mentorship from partners at firms. They don't have access. They feel like they're a number. They're just sitting there. They don't even know where their career is going to go long term, but they have this massive paycheck. It's very similar in like investment banking industries, right? And they don't necessarily have the guidance of where to go moving forward. And so while interviewing them, sometimes it's more educational. In some cases, if I feel like somebody's coming from big law and they're like, well, I saw this position and it sounded great. This would be an example where we don't have a salary disclosed because the firm chose not to. Everything sounds great. We've talked about work-life balance in the post, and then we'll get to the salary and they're like, well, I don't want that. And then at that point, it's a conversation around, well, are you, what's more important to you? Is it salary? Is it work-life balance at this time in your life? I'd say location goes into that too. I see a lot of associates start to move out into other areas. And so usually it goes by the age of the candidate, but I do see a strong trend towards about late 20s to early 30s where people are starting to migrate out of big law and start exploring these small firms.
Yeah. And what do you think about, there's so many different sort of elements to what someone is looking for in a candidate. So you mentioned culture now. We've talked about, salary, work ethic. I mean, there's a lot of lawyers sort of complaining about the level of work ethic, and they can say the term, and I can say this because I'm old, like back in the day, like there's the Gen X really unhappy with maybe some of the younger generations work ethic because they, started off with, and I'm not trying to generalize anything. I'm just saying what I'm hearing is, that work-life balance became a real theme. And now you add into that the virtual workplace situation where they're working from home. You add those two combined, and it's really frustrating. I think a lot of lawyers and law firms that are looking for someone that's going to get the job done.
Absolutely. I had this conversation yesterday because I truly believe workplace culture is defined by work ethic. And work ethic can't really be taught, right? You kind of either have it or you don't, or you're motivated or you're not. And so when I'm interviewing candidates, it's really about, why do you want to work here and why do you want to work here long term? Is there something particular about the firm? I really look for passion. Is this what somebody, for employment law, for example, do they have a personal story that is going to really drive them? Reference is another aspect to an extent, but like we always say, it's very rare that somebody is going to give a reference that they think that wouldn't say something
bad
good about
reference.
them.
Yeah, talk to these bad references. They'll tell you how horrible.
I've had them though. I've had two so far. I have. So it depends.
Well, I had an employee steal from me. She did 11 months in Cook County jail, stealing from me as my office manager, and she still put me down as a reference after she got out. I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see. I think also the time it takes when I'm interviewing somebody, if it takes a very odd amount of time for them to get back to me with reference, a little bit of a red flag. This would be something that you should be staying in contact with your references, right? It shouldn't be somewhere you've spoken to 6 years ago. So I would say that's really important. In terms of work ethic, I have seen a few firms do like a 60 to 90 day trial with these candidates to really make sure that it's going to be a good fit. Or sometimes they'll hire them for 6 months and then based on their work ethic, the work that they're producing, they'll promise an increase by the end of the year if they've reached a goal. Different types of incentives like that, and test projects and writing samples. That's been huge lately too, just to kind of see, are we getting it done on a timely process? But I do feel it's fairly evident when I'm interviewing if somebody is as determined to come in with a really strong work ethic. Are they ready to go? Are they lazy? Even the way that somebody gets back to me when I interview them for an interview, when I email them for an interview, is it 6 days or is it within 24 hours? That's a big difference. Do they really want this? So that's been something that's been interesting in this market. I will say some firms assume sometimes that, not that they were looking for an older candidate, but they think that's who we're going to end up with. And I have seen a lot of great Gen Z candidates come out that are really excited to work for these firms and have a great work ethic as well.
Yeah, so it might be more about just kind of working through the individual candidates to find the one that has the work ethic. It might take 10 to get to one, but that's or maybe not. I don't know, but that's what I think sometimes has to happen. And but I think when you get work ethic, and again, that also relates to the culture. If the culture of the firm is, look, we work hard, but we also play hard, or we also take time off. Like, let's work really hard, but let's also make sure we take time away and enjoy our families and, have babies or whatever it is that's going on to make sure that you get the work-life balance. But when I ask you to get something done, and I don't want excuses, I want it done. And that's also part of the culture.
Absolutely. And I think it's great to be transparent about that. If a firm voices that's what they want, I usually make it pretty explicit and obviously a professional way in a job posting. But, a lot of firms say, hey, if the work gets done, I don't care if they come at 7:30 or 9:30. If we have a 9:30 start time and they want to leave at 4:30 to go pick up their kids, great. Just get the work done, be there for trials. But be transparent about that. I feel that that's really important in today's market because a lot of firms aren't doing that. So, through the job posting and interviews, make sure that it's known.
Yeah. And let's take a few minutes to just talk about recruiting as an investment, because I think one of the biggest hangups that lawyers and law firms have is that, and I'm not going to say it's out of hand, but maybe you agree that, 20-30% of a salary of to find somebody again, and there's just a hang up about it. I mean, there's no question there's a hang up about it, but ultimately how much could it, if it's seen as an investment and you find the right recruiter, it could make all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say today's average is about 18 to 30%, just kind of depending on, I see a lot of 22, 25, 30% is actually very common. But it's a lot for a small firm to take on, right? So, excuse me, when you're in the midst of building a business, no matter if it's 6 months, I'm thinking for my work with, up to 5 years even, and no matter what stage you're at, but especially during that time, it's this unexpected expense that you might have to incur when all of a sudden you have a ton of work coming in and now you have to hire and you're like, okay, wow, now I need to budget for this separate expense. A lot of firms don't know how much that fee actually is when they seek out a recruiter. And so it can be quite shocking. I work on a different model, which is flat rate, which has been advantageous to these small, medium-sized firms because they know what they're going to have to pay. There is no conflict of interest when it's going back and forth between me and the candidate because I'm not trying to get them to increase their salary so that I get a higher rate. And it allows them to scale efficiently. So I know many firms that put off hiring because they simply couldn't afford the recruiter fee on top of the salary with today's market salaries. And so it's made it where they can hire on a flat rate basis, but now they can also hire for several roles. So they don't have to just hire the associate. Now they can afford the legal admin. It's at least very common in New York to go to a networking event and hear attorneys complaining about the recruiter fee.
Yeah. And ultimately, though, if we, and I can say the same thing about my fee. I mean, I'm charging a significant fee for a reason. Sure. When someone can double, triple their book, when they can get to $1 million, 2, 3, 4, right. My fee is, pennies on the dollar when we get to those kinds of levels. Right. And recruiting can be the same thing. If you have a lawyer that is billing at $500 an hour and $1,800 a year, and you start doing the math over 5 or 10 years and what the profit is, the recruiting fee ends up being pennies on the dollar over time. I think their concern is A, they don't have that money if they're small, or B, it's still seen as an expense versus seen as an investment, which I think is maybe that's just an issue with the recruiters and how they're actually selling the service.
That's a really good point. And just their mindset around it, right? So it's interesting when I work with career professionals and attorneys on their career, we'll often send them like a mindset piece, like how to really get into the right mindset before hopping on this call and talking about it. And I think that would be a great point for firms that are looking to hire is not just what is the expense now, but what is it going to do for me in the future and how is it going to help me grow and scale?
Yeah. I mean, an idea too would be, maybe creating some case studies about what a great hire means to a firm over time, because if it's $3 million in profit over 10 years and the fee is, $40,000 or whatever it ends up being, like, okay, so I'm putting in $40,000, but look, I can get 3 million if it's the right hire. And there's a guarantee in many cases. So you're not held to somebody. What are the guarantees? Is that 6 months, a year? What is a guarantee?
Everyone's different. I do 90 days.
Okay. But some go as high as, I think, 6 months or a year, or?
I don't see a year often. I think it depends. Like if it's more of a senior associate partner,
90 days might be more the standard.
Yeah, I do know. I see 90 days a lot. I see 60 days a lot as well. I used to do 60 days and I just find, quite frankly, I think in 30 days if it's not a good fit. But I do like to allow for those 90 days in case that person is to leave so that they don't feel, stuck.
Yeah. So I think we've spent a good amount of time on the candidate side I guess we've spent time on both ends, but my apologies. I think we spent time on the law firm side. On the candidate side, how should lawyers prepare to start thinking about changing jobs, if they're in an unhappy
Yeah.
situation, what are the three things that they should be doing to start getting ready
Mm.
to move?
Yeah. First thing is do it early. I see sometimes like firms are laying off, depending, if you're at a firm where the partners might be retiring and they don't have a backup plan or succession or whatever may be happening. And they're like, oh, wow, I have 3 months. I got 3 months notice. So be proactive about your branding, get everything in order. I've had several attorneys come to me and say, like, I haven't even updated my resume because I've been at this firm for so long. Get all of that in order in advance. Be proactive. The second thing I always say is have conduct informational interviews. If you've been in big law for a really long time, start speaking to people at smaller law firms, or if you're looking to go in house at these firms, and determine how they did it, and B, where are they now? Which leads me to my third is when you're looking at these people to speak at a networking event or on LinkedIn, I see a lot of people looking for the person that they want to be right now versus where they want to be in 10 years. And I think it's actually better to look where you want to be in 10 years and then backtrack and figure out how to get there.
Yeah, that's really bright, really good. So as we wrap up, I want to just bring up your game-changing book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. That sounds tough.
Yeah.
What's the deal with that? What's up with that book?
Yeah, so it's by Joe Dispenza, and it's really fascinating because he's very relatable to the average person. And so I find that, it's not like you're looking into somebody who grew up with this type of mindset of meditation and et cetera, right? And now you're trying to be them. It's someone who grew up with parents that didn't expose him to any of this. And it's quite fascinating to see how you can change your mindset on several things. And he backs everything up with science, which I really like because I like facts and proof. It is one of those reads. I like to go through a book quite quickly, and it is something that you have to read sections and then you go for a walk. And I do read it on an annual basis as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. We'll have to check that out. As we wrap up, want to thank our wonderful sponsors, of course, Lawmatics, Get Staffed Up, and Green Cardigan Marketing. Check those all out on our website, fretzin.com. And if people want to get in touch with you, Erin, they are tired of the traditional approach to recruiting. They want to try something different model, and they liked what you said today. What's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, I'm, again, like we had mentioned before, I'm on LinkedIn quite often. Just make sure that my last name is spelled S-E-N at the end of Andersen. You can look me up there. I'm sure my email will also be in the show notes, so you can check it out there, but it's just info@yourbrandnetworker.com. Those are the two best places to get in touch.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you for, sharing your wisdom. I mean, we covered actually a lot of ground in about 30 minutes. I mean, that's you were, you really tackled it head on with me. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, really great. So we'll have you back, and let's keep talking.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay. And thank you, everybody, for hanging out with Erin and I today on the Be That Lawyer with Fretzin podcast. We are working with you every single week, twice a week, to help you to be that lawyer, someone who's confident, organized, and a skilled rainmaker. Take care, everybody. Be safe, be well. We'll talk again soon.